This drama series begins by showing a young man named Kim Gunwoo, who is training at a boxing gym in the city. On his way home on a bus, Gunwoo is praised by the passengers because he bravely warns a drunk man who broke the rules by not wearing a mask and was about to hit the bus driver. Although Gunwoo urged the drunk man to get off the bus, he was also polite to the man, as he didn't want to cause trouble. Upon arriving home, Gunwoo accidentally eavesdropped on his mother, So-yin, who was talking to someone on the phone. From the conversation, Gunwoo learns that his mother owes a considerable amount of money to a loan shark and seems to be struggling to pay off the debt on time, so So-yin asks for a 1-month extension of the due date. The scene then switches and shows a young businessman named Hong Min-byum meeting with the bank owner, Miss Shin, at a fancy restaurant. During the meeting, Min-byum intends to ask the bank for a loan of 400 billion won, but he will only pay 300 billion won. Min-byum argues that the country's economy is in a slump due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it also affects his company, Lil Group, which is on the verge of bankruptcy. In the middle of the meeting, they are surprised by the arrival of a loan shark named Kim Myung-gil, who agrees to invest in the construction of the hotel that Min-byum will build. Myung-gil even promises that he will invest over 100 billion won and pay Min-byum's remaining debt to the bank if Min-byum agrees to his conditions. Firstly, Myung-gil asked Min-byum to let him set up a casino on the top floor of the hotel and convert the basement of the hotel into an exclusive bar. In addition, Myung-gil also wants Min-byum to agree to open his hotel into a quarantine center if at any time the COVID-19 cases increase drastically and require a larger quarantine center. Myung-gil adds that they should help each other in difficult times, and showing concern for others will make Min-byum and Lil Group's reputation better in the eyes of the public. Although Myung-gil seems sincere in helping Min-byum, he seems to have a specific purpose because, after all, Myung-gil is a cunning man who always calculates everything. The following day, Gunwoo, who works as a professional boxer, is participating in a novice boxing tournament held behind closed doors during the COVID-19 pandemic. In the tournament, a young boxer, Hong Woo-jin, managed to defeat his opponents without much difficulty, while Gunwoo was able to knock out his opponents with just one punch. Woo-jin and Gunwoo made it to the finals and faced each other, trying to beat each other to victory. Before the match, the coach warned Woo-jin to be wary of Gunwoo's punching technique that could knock out his opponents in no time. However, Woo-jin felt confident that he could beat Gunwoo because he was a former Marine. The initial fight was evenly matched as Gunwoo and Woo-jin were both novice boxers who possessed great skills with their own uniqueness. If Gunwoo was a tough infighter, then Woo-jin was an outboxer who was good at counterattacking. In the middle of the match, Gunwoo managed to knock Woo-jin down by hitting Woo-jin's left abdomen suddenly. However, Woo-jin was still able to get up and continue the fight, even thinking of ways to defeat Gunwoo. Unfortunately, Woo-jin was unable to withstand Gunwoo's left punch and was knocked down a second time until Gunwoo won the tournament. After the match, Gunwoo takes Woo-jin out for a meal, and Woo-jin asks Gunwoo to treat him to beef since Gunwoo won the 10 million won prize money. However, Gunwoo reveals to Woo-jin that he'll only take 50,000 won as he'll give the rest of the money to his mother to pay the cafe rent. Over lunch, Gunwoo tells Woo-jin that he worked at several places before deciding to become a boxer. When he learns that Gunwoo was also a former Marine during his military service, Woo-jin seems excited, and they soon become close friends. On the way home, Gunwoo accidentally finds a loan shark's business card, and Woo-jin explains that the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the emergence of many loan sharks who take advantage of people who are experiencing financial difficulties. Upon hearing that, Gunwoo then reveals to Woo-jin that his mother is also struggling financially because the landlord is charging rent at the usual rate, even though their income has drastically decreased due to the pandemic. Since closing the cafe is more expensive, Gunwoo's mother decides to stay until the economy recovers. Before leaving, Woo-jin asks for Gunwoo's phone number, promising to treat him next time. Shortly afterward, Gunwoo meets his mother at the cafe and gives his mother the prize money from the boxing tournament. So-yeon initially rejects the money from her son, but Gunwoo tells her that his purpose for entering the tournament was because of the prize money offered by the organizers, and he has decided to give the prize money to his mother. So-yeon looks both pleased and proud of her son for caring so much about her, and she tells Gunwoo that she'll return the money with interest. As they're about to head home, Gunwoo accidentally sees Myung-gil's car stopped not far from his mother's cafe. Myung-gil apparently had a secret meeting with his marketing manager, Jun-min, who informed him that the business owners in the area had taken out loans to pay rent and owed the bank quite a lot of money. Upon hearing that, Myung-gil ordered Jun-min to transfer the tenants' loans to their company, Smile Capital, as they needed to take over the business park as soon as possible. The following day, Jun-min and his team started visiting the business owners who rented space in the area and convinced them to take out loans from Smile Capital to pay their rent and settle their debts with the bank. With a persuasive tone, Jun-min and his team managed to convince So-yeon and a few business owners to sign contracts with Smile Capital, while luring them that Smile Capital only intends to help them and not take any profit. On the other hand, Gunwoo intends to train at the boxing gym as usual, but unexpectedly, the boxing gym is closed for a few days because one of the boxers is confirmed to have COVID-19. Gunwoo then called his coach to ask if he needed to get tested, but the coach said that Gunwoo was doing a tournament yesterday, so he didn't need to get tested. Furthermore, the coach tells Gunwoo to take a week off and rest, but Gunwoo feels bored if he doesn't do anything, so he calls Woo-jin. Woo-jin, who had just woken up, gave Gunwoo his home address and told Gunwoo to come to his house. On the way to Woo-jin's house, Gunwoo accidentally saw a man running away because he was being chased by someone. The kind-hearted Gunwoo intends to help the man, but instead he finds him lying on the road and rushes after the person he thought had attacked him. Surprisingly, the attacker manages to knock Gunwoo out with a stun gun, then reveals her identity, which turns out to be a young woman named Hyunju. Hyunju then asks Gunwoo why he's chasing her, and after listening to Gunwoo's explanation, Hyunju tells Gunwoo that he's misunderstood about her and leaves him. Elsewhere, a woman comes to see Mr. Choi to pay a debt to him. She seems so grateful that Mr. Choi lent her a considerable amount of money without interest. The woman then explained that her husband had gotten a job at a big company and got quite a lot of severance paid from his former company, so she immediately used some of the money to pay off her debt to Miss Choi. Miss Choi actually never urged her to pay her debt immediately, but she felt so grateful that Miss Choi helped her when her family was in bad condition, so she wanted to repay Mr. Choi immediately after getting the money. Soon after that, Hyunju arrives at Miss Choi's place and reveals that she works for Mr. Choi and is also his adoptive granddaughter. Hyunju then gives Miss Choi a luxury watch that she stole from a man named Jae Myung, who owes Mr. Choi 10 million won. After examining the watch, Mr. Choi tells Hyunju that it's worth 20 million won, and Hyunju seems happy because that means they're getting interest on the loan. However, Miss Choi reminds her that the most valuable interest on the loan is the happiness of the people they're helping, as helping others to live a debt-free life is a joy for Miss Choi. Upon hearing that, Hyunju realizes that she can't convince Mr. Choi to change his rules, so Hyunju changes the subject. Hyunju informs Mr. Choi about Jan Myung and his gang of thugs who often steal the identities of homeless people to apply for loans from loan sharks, and she intends to investigate the matter. Upon knowing that Hyunju will face danger that might threaten her life, Mr. Choi then asks for help from his acquaintance, Gwangmu, to find someone who has experience working in the loan business and also great enough fighting skills to work for him. On the other hand, Gunwoo and Woo-jin spent time over lunch and chatted about many things, including their favorite boxers and the Super Series tournament that had to be postponed due to the pandemic. Even though the tournament was postponed, Gunwoo told Woo-jin that he would always train every day so that he could be ready to compete at any time. Later that evening, Myung-gil and his men hold a small party because the mayor has approved their proposal to build a casino. Myung-gil then presents a gift to the mayor's assistant, Mr. Park, assuring Mr. Park that he can make Mr. Park a mayor, even a president, if Mr. Park agrees to continue working with him. Upon hearing that, Mr. Park agreed to accept the gift from Man Gil, but unbeknownst to him, Man Gil was secretly recording Mr. Park with the CCTV camera installed in the room. Soon after that, Man Gil accelerates the building takeover plan by hiring a group of thugs to bully the business owners into moving out of the building. Later that evening, Jun-min comes to So-Yeon's cafe and collects the loan renewal fee that So-Yeon has to pay within 24 hours. Jun-min argues that the terms are written in the contract signed by So-Yeon. However, So-Yeon believes that she never knew about the obligation to pay the renewal fee, so she threatens Jun-min that she will report him to the police. However, Jun-min ordered the gang of thugs to vandalize the property to threaten So-Yeon. A terrified So-Yeon then calls Gun-woo, who is on his way to pick up his mother, and he rushes over when he hears his mother screaming in terror. Upon arrival, Gun-woo manages to defeat the gang of thugs and rushes Jun-min. At the same time, Man Gil appears and tells Gun-woo that his mother owes him money. Man Gil then tells Gun-woo and his mother to pay their debt, but Gun-woo retorts that Man Gil should pay for the damage to their cafe. Upon knowing that Gun-woo was trying to intimidate him, Man Gil ordered his bodyguard, Byum, to fight Gun-woo. Gun-woo is initially able to corner Byum, but Byum soon becomes enraged and beats Gun-woo so badly that he's unable to fight back. Seeing Gun-woo's persistence and his considerable fighting skills, Man Gil intended to recruit him as his subordinate. However, Gun-woo spits on him and Man Gil becomes upset and slashes Gun-woo's face while threatening to kill So-Yeon if Gun-woo reports them to the police. Sometime later, the doctor advised Gun-woo to undergo laser treatment to remove his facial scars, because Gun-woo was still young. However, since laser treatment is quite expensive, Gun-woo refuses the suggestion. Woo-jin then explains to Gun-woo that the rules about loan renewal fees are written in the contract, and So-Yeon has to pay 10% of the principal every week until her debt is paid off. However, the rule was deliberately written in small font, so it's natural that So-Yeon didn't realize. Since Gun-woo has to pay the loan renewal fee this week, Woo-jin introduces him to a loan shark who agrees to lend Gun-woo 100 million won at a low interest rate so he can pay off his debt to Smile Capital. But in exchange, Gun-woo and Woo-jin have to work for him as debt collectors. Since beating up weak people in trouble is tantamount to thuggery, Gun-woo and Woo-jin then reject the offer while emphasizing to the loan shark that they are not thugs, but boxers. On the other hand, Hyun-ju secretly follows Jae-myung, who has just borrowed money from a loan shark using a fake identity. While stalking Jae-myung, Hyun-ju sees him enter a building and meet a man who is none other than Jun-min. Hyun-ju then secretly takes a photo of Jun-min, who happens to be wearing a Smile Capital name tag. Meanwhile, Gwang-moo seems annoyed that the candidates he called didn't fulfill the desired criteria, and he sends them away. At the same time, Gwang-moo gets a phone call from Woo-jin, and he tells Woo-jin to come to his office. Upon hearing that, Woo-jin then invites Gun-woo to rush to meet Gwang-moo because Gwang-moo is their senior in the Marine Corps. Upon arrival, Gwang-moo explains to Woo-jin and Gun-woo about Mr. Choi looking for a bodyguard and intends to recommend them to Mr. Choi. However, Woo-jin tells Gwang-moo that he called Gwang-moo because Gun-woo is in need of a loan and Gwang-moo is the owner of Dream on Capital. Upon learning that, Gwang-moo assures them that Mr. Choi will definitely take care of it if Gun-woo is hired because Mr. Choi always cares about the people around him, especially those who work for him. Upon arriving home, Hyun-ju informs Mr. Choi that Jae-myung has borrowed money from 7 different loan sharks, totaling 400 million won. Hyun-ju also adds that Jae-myung gave the money to a man named Jun-min who works for Smile Capital. Hyun-ju then shows Mr. Choi Jun-min's picture, but Mr. Choi doesn't recognize him. However, Mr. Choi assumed that Jae-myung might have set up the shell corporation and used the identities of the homeless to borrow money from loan sharks. Ms. Choi added that individual moneylenders would have been fooled as they don't usually share such information with each other. Miss Choi believes that it must have been designed by someone very experienced and familiar with the flow of money, while Jae Myung was just a pawn. Miss Choi recounted that in the 2000s, a man pretended to be a volunteer at a disability facility and stole their identities. The man then set up a shell company and borrowed 7 billion won from loan sharks in the city, then fled to the Philippines. After the man fled overseas, the loan sharks agreed to raise money and send a hunter to capture the man. Upon hearing that, Hyun-ju then asks Mr. Choi if the man is dead, and Miss Choi simply nods to confirm it. Mr. Choi then tells her that he intends to hire someone to escort Hyun-ju, but Hyun-ju insists that she prefers to work alone and leaves. The following day, Miss Choi goes to interview Gun-woo, as he intends to recruit him. However, Mr. Choi's chauffeur, In-muk, advises Mr. Choi to recruit Gun-woo and Woo-jin, as their personalities complement each other, especially since Woo-jin also has experience in the money-lending business. Gun-woo then tells him about the loan shark who damaged his mother's cafe and also seriously injured him. Miss Choi seems to sympathize with Gun-woo after hearing this, and he tells Gun-woo that he intends to hire a bodyguard to protect the only person he considers as his own family. Miss Choi is impressed by Gun-woo's personality, who continues to live his life well and diligently, even though he's in trouble. Also, Miss Choi thought that Gun-woo was a trustworthy young man. After the meeting, Miss Choi tells In-muk to help Gun-woo solve his problems with the loan shark, as he has decided to hire Gun-woo as a bodyguard. Later that evening, In-muk goes to Gun-woo's house and gives Gun-woo 100 million won in cash so that Gun-woo can pay off his debt to the loan shark. In-muk explains that the money is a 2-year advance payment of his salary and informs Gun-woo that he'll be starting work tomorrow. Gun-woo couldn't stem his tears as he felt so relieved and happy to get this surprise. After thanking In-muk, Gun-woo then told his mother and Woo-jin that he had been hired by Miss Choi, and Miss Choi had even paid his salary in advance for 2 years so that Gun-woo could pay off his debt. On the other hand, Myung-gil was about to have a meeting with Min-byum at his bar. Myung-gil's lover, Min-jung, then warns him because Min-byum's family has connections in various lines in the government, which could make things difficult for them if they accidentally upset Min-byum. In addition, Myung-gil's assistant, Jang-do, tells him that Min-byum brought someone to their meeting. Jang-do explained that the man was his senior at the police academy and was a top graduate. Upon learning that, Myung-gil tells Jang-do to be careful that he doesn't lose his temper and take actions that could harm them. Myung-gil then enters the room and introduces Jang-do as his personal assistant, while Min-byum introduces the cop, Gang-yong, as his cousin. After downing a few glasses of liquor, Min-byum begins to interrogate Myung-gil about his wealth because Min-byum had sent someone to investigate and found out that Myung-gil's company, Smile Capital, only had less than 50 billion won in assets. Gang-yong suggests that Min-byum order the tax department to officially investigate Smile Capital, as he suspects that Myung-gil may have committed fraud. Min-byum even finds out that Myung-gil lied to him during their first meeting. Min-byum then tells Myung-gil that he has secured 100 billion won to settle the remaining payments to the bank, so he no longer needs Myung-gil. Min-byum also threatened to kill Myung-gil if Myung-gil dared to disturb him and his family. After the meeting, Myung-gil orders Jang-do to find Min-byum's weakness. The next day, Woo-jin tries to convince Mr. Choi to hire him so he can help Gun-woo. Miss Choi has no objections, but he informs Woo-jin and Gun-woo that they must convince Hyun-ju to accept them as her bodyguards. If they fail, they'll be fired immediately and Gun-woo will have to return the 100 million won that Mr. Choi gave him as an advance payment. While waiting for Hyun-ju, Woo-jin and Gun-woo discover a pile of cash hidden in neatly arranged boxes on a huge bookshelf. Upon knowing that, Gun-woo and Woo-jin are stunned as they had no idea that Mr. Choi had that much cash, let alone that it was hidden in an unlocked room. Gun-woo then reveals to Woo-jin that he's met Hyun-ju and is worried that Hyun-ju doesn't like him because he didn't leave a good impression, which caused Hyun-ju to curse at him and stun him with a stun gun. Upon hearing that, Woo-jin calms Gun-woo down by saying that he'll try to persuade Hyenju to accept them working for her. However, Hyenju, who didn't want to be escorted in the first place, tells Woojin to leave because Woojin always denies her. On the other hand, Gunwoo then kneels before Hyenju, while begging her to accept him to work as her bodyguard, at least for a few months because he really needs the job. Gunwoo also reveals to Hyenju that Miss Choi has been paying his salary in advance for 2 years, and he has been using the money to pay his debt to Smile Capital. Upon hearing Smile Capital's name, surprisingly, Hyenju immediately hires Gunwoo and Woojin because she was investigating Jae-myung and Smile Capital. Furthermore, Gunwoo explained to Hyenju that his mother had been cheated by Smile Capital and their debt had ballooned to 100 million won. Even though Gunwoo had paid off the debt, they had damaged his mother's cafe, so they had suffered an even bigger loss. Gunwoo added that he couldn't report it to the police, either because their boss threatened to kill his mother. After listening to Gunwoo's account, Hyenju explains to them that Jae-myung had borrowed 10 million won from Miss Choi, but refused to pay the debt. Therefore, Hyenju takes the initiative to investigate Jae-myung and discovers that Jae-myung and his accomplices pretended to be homeless and stole identities from real homeless people to create shell companies and bank accounts that they would later use to defraud loan sharks by taking out loans totaling hundreds of millions of won. Hyenju then shows a picture of Junmin to Gunwoo, and Gunwoo tells her that he knows Junmin because Junmin is the man who cheated his mother. Later that night, Hyenju assigns Gunwoo and Woojin to tail Jae-myung and his accomplices to find out their modus operandi of stealing identities from homeless people who usually sleep in underground stations. Hyenju warns them to hold back and not lose their temper no matter what, because her plan will fall apart if they get caught. At the underground station, they discovered that Jae-myung and his accomplices approached some homeless people and claimed to be from the homeless association funded by their city, and promised to give them 300,000 won if they would provide their identity cards to be registered for social assistance. Since the homeless were starving and in need of money, they unhesitatingly gave their ID cards to Jae-myung and his accomplices, who also asked them to keep it a secret as not everyone was eligible. Some of the homeless refused to give their ID cards, and some urged Jae-myung to return his ID card because they realized that Jae-myung had cheated him, but Jae-myung and his accomplices beat the old man to a pulp. Upon seeing that, Gunwoo immediately ran to save the old man and ignored Woojin, who tried to prevent him from interfering because Hyenju had warned them not to get caught. On the other hand, Jae-myung recognizes the hat Gunwoo is wearing and intends to attack him. But at the same time, Woojin comes to Gunwoo's aid, while Jae-myung and his accomplices choose to run away. Gunwoo then calls for an ambulance because the homeless man is badly injured, but Hyenju then gets upset and scolds them for letting Jae-myung and his accomplices escape from their watch. Gunwoo tries to explain that the homeless man lost a lot of blood and is dying, but Hyenju refuses to listen to any explanation and ends the call. Shortly afterward, Gunwoo and Woojin return to Miss Choi's place, where Hyenju scolds them severely for ruining her plan to gather evidence and clues regarding the fraud committed by Jae-myung and his accomplice. Not only that, Hyenju also fired them immediately, even though Woojin had tried to explain the situation they faced when confronting Jae-myung and his accomplices. Gunwoo then revealed to Hyenju that the boss of Smile Capital had cut his face with a knife, and if he was silent while watching others dying, then it meant that he was worse than him. Upon learning that, Hyenju then realized her mistake and told them to work back on her. On the other hand, Jae-myung reports to Junmin about Gunwoo and Woojin confronting them. Junmin looks furious when he hears about it, but Jae-myung informs him that he recognized them as debt collectors from a loan shark. The following day, Hyenju explains to Woojin and Gunwoo that she plans to find the loan sharks that Jae-myung has cheated, return their money, and take a commission. Woojin seems to agree with the plan, but Gunwoo reminds them that it will make it even more difficult for the debtors who borrowed money from the loan sharks which will indirectly make the small businessmen and poor people suffer more as they are tortured more to cover the loan shark's losses. At the same time, they see Jun Min and Jae Myung heading their way, so Hyun-ju shuts the place down and turns off the lights, and tells Gun-woo and Woo-jin to switch off their mobile phones. Even so, they can't fool Jun Min, who soon realizes that the bookstore they're using as a disguise is actually where they keep their money because the door is made of iron. Hyun-ju then wonders how Jae Myung found out about them, and Gun-woo reveals to Hyun-ju that Jae Myung probably recognized the hat Hyun-ju wore when trying to catch him a few days ago because last night Gun-woo was wearing it. Soon after that, Mr. Choi and In-muk arrive at the place, and Mr. Choi immediately scolds Hyun-ju for still insisting on catching Jae Myung. An annoyed Hyun-ju then tries to justify her actions and explains everything to Mr. Choi, while telling Gun-woo to show the laceration on his face. Mr. Choi is stunned when he sees the wound, and he then asks Gun-woo about the person who hurt him. Gun-woo revealed that the person who hurt him was the boss of Smile Capital, who had a scratch mark on his right cheek. Upon learning that, Mr. Choi tells Hyun-ju and the others to leave, then orders In-muk to find out if the boss of Smile Capital is Kim Moung-gil. While eating lunch, Hyun-ju tells Gun-woo and Woo-jin that she had spinal cancer when she was 8 years old and made a full recovery when she was 10. But at the same time, her father passed away, so she was sent to an orphanage. At that time, Hyun-ju didn't feel at home in the orphanage, so she ran away. However, she suffered even more after leaving the orphanage, so she decided to return to the orphanage. When she was 17, she was transferred to Mr. Choi's orphanage, who helped her sincerely. Gun-woo agrees with that because he also thinks that Mr. Choi is a kind and sincere person, so he is determined to always protect Mr. Choi and his family, no matter what. On the other hand, Moung-gil explains to Jun Min about his plan to destroy Min Byum and take over his hotel. At the same time, Jang-do gets a phone call from an automatic car wash employee who informs him that Min Byum has arrived at the place. Upon hearing that, Jang-do orders him to carry out their plan to lock Min Byum up in that place. Shortly afterward, Jang-do sends a gang of thugs and orders them to beat Min Byum severely, then strip him of his clothes. After beating Min Byum up, Jang-do then warns him not to make trouble with Moung-gil and tells Min Byum to take off his trousers. Because Min Byum refuses, Jang-do then forces Min Byum to drink clean fluid. Min Byum finally gives in and apologizes. Then he starts to take off his pants, while Jang-do films him and sends the footage to Moung-gil. Meanwhile, Mr. Choi gets a phone call from In-muk, who tells him that Moung-gil is the boss of Smile Capital. Upon hearing that, Mr. Choi is reminded of the past, when he was a loan shark boss who had many henchmen, including Gwang-moo and Moung-gil. At that time, Mr. Choi decided to close the company and give his employees their last salary and a substantial severance pay. Moung-gil didn't seem to like the decision, but he couldn't do anything against his boss' decision and intended to rob Mr. Choi's safe in his office. Later that night, Mr. Choi received a call from In-muk informing him that his office was being robbed. Upon knowing that, Mr. Choi rushed to his office and found Byum, who had managed to break into his safe. Ms. Choi managed to take Byum down and knock out his accomplice, but at the same time, Moung-gil suddenly appeared and stabbed Mr. Choi several times. Moung-gil and Mr. Choi then engaged in a fierce fight, until Mr. Choi was able to knock Moung-gil down and slashed his right cheek with a knife. Unexpectedly, Byum arrived in time to help Moung-gil and then dropped him through the window. Shortly afterward, Moung-gil tells Byum to take all the money in the safe and leave the place, while he sets the place on fire. In the present, Ms. Choi asks Hyun-ju to avoid Jae Myung and his accomplices, as they will not hesitate to commit murder. Ms. Choi tells Hyun-ju that he's old and wants to leave his legacy to Hyun-ju. Therefore, Ms. Choi hopes that Hyun-ju can stay alive to continue his legacy. On the other hand, Moung-gil takes Byum to the place where he hid the 500 million won worth of gold bars. Moung-gil explains that he intends to go to Vietnam if his business in South Korea fails. The following day, Woo-jin takes Gun-woo and Hyun-ju to lunch at his favorite eatery. Upon arrival, they are shocked to find that the restaurant has been vandalized by a gang of thugs hired by a loan shark because the owner hasn't been able to pay his debts. Woo Jin then calls his acquaintance, Im, who turns out to be the loan shark who lent the restaurant owner the money. After hanging up, Woo Jin tells Gun-woo and Hyun-ju that Im has been scammed by Jae Myung for 500 million won. Upon hearing that, Woo Jin and Gun-woo are determined to catch Jae Myung, so they can get the money to help the diner owner and others who are struggling financially. Later that night, Hyun-ju and the others do a reconnaissance on Jae Myung and his accomplice's hideout. But unfortunately, Jae Myung realizes their presence, so he calls Jun-min and rushes to carry out their plan. Soon after that, Hyun-ju and the others followed Jae Myung and his accomplices who were about to carry out their action at the underground crossing. Upon arrival, Hyun-ju parked her car, while Gun-woo and Woo Jin followed Jae Myung into the underground crossing. On the other hand, Hyun-ju, who was waiting in the car, soon realized that they had been spotted when she saw the gang of thugs entering the underground crossing. Knowing that her friends are in danger, Hyun-ju immediately calls Mr. Choi for help. Meanwhile, Jun-min, who also comes to the place with the gang of thugs, discovers that the person who has been spying on Jae Myung is none other than Gun-woo. Upon knowing that, Jun-min tells his subordinates to find out Gun-woo's home address. Surprisingly, Gun-woo and Woo Jin have great fighting skills as they are able to dominate the fight, until they finally manage to defeat the gang of thugs with the help of Hyun-ju. On the other hand, Jun-min orders Jae Myung to kidnap Gun-woo's mother, but at the same time, Mr. Choi has anticipated it and assigns his subordinate, Hwang, to rescue So-yeon and bring her to Mr. Choi's house. In addition, Mr. Choi also assigned Lee to help Gun-woo and Woo Jin, but he arrived too late as they had already left the place. Shortly afterward, Hyun-ju brings Gun-woo and Woo Jin to Mr. Choi's house, where Mr. Choi then expresses his disappointment to them because they ignored his warning. Upon knowing that Mr. Choi is very worried about Hyun-ju, Hwang takes the initiative to confront Myung-gil and will ask Lee to help him, while Mr. Choi assigns In-muk to find information about all of Myung-gil's men. The next day, Myung-gil visits Jae Myung and his accomplices who have to undergo intensive treatment at the hospital, and Myung-gil soon learns that the person who has injured them is Hwang. Myung-gil then explained to his subordinates about Hwang and Lee, who were Mr. Choi's confidants and also were professional killers with knife specialists. Myung-gil adds that he and Byum killed some of them, but Hwang and Lee got away, and he discovered that they are still working for Mr. Choi. Jun-min informs that Mr. Choi also has a female employee assigned to look after the bookstore. Upon hearing that, Myung-gil immediately figures out that the bookstore is just a camouflage and Mr. Choi must be storing cash there, and orders Byum and Jang-do to rob the bookstore. On the other hand, Mr. Choi and his subordinates start investigating Myung-gil and his accomplices and get information about Jun-min and Jang-do, who have committed several crimes and been sent to prison. While Hwang and Lee do reconnaissance, Hyun-ju and the others are tasked by Mr. Choi to move all the cash they have hidden in the bookstore. However, unbeknownst to them, Byum and Jang-do are already in the building to execute their plan. Jang-do is able to subdue Hyun-ju and tie her up, while Byum confronts Gun-woo and Woo Jin inside the warehouse. Hyun-ju tries to fight back and manages to knock Jang-do unconscious, and at the same time, Gun-woo and Woo Jin engage in a fierce battle against Byum, who possesses incredible physical strength. However, thanks to their solid cooperation, they finally manage to defeat Byum. Soon after that, Hyun-ju and the others discover that Jang-do managed to escape, so they immediately rush to collect all the cash and leave the place. But at the same time, a gang of thugs arrive at the place, and they get into a tense chase. Hyun-ju and Woo Jin manage to destroy one of the thugs' cars, but unfortunately their car is also damaged, so they rush to grab the bag of gold and escape. Woo Jin and Hyun-ju are eventually forced to leave their bags behind as they're quite heavy and only slow them down. On the other hand, Gun-woo, who realized that his friends were in danger, stopped his car and took out several boxes of money so he could pick them up and escape from the thugs. At home, Miss Choi reveals to Hwang that he knew from the beginning that Myung-gil was in trouble because he was an ex-convict. At that time, Miss Choi wanted to give Myung-gil a chance who claimed to want to live a better life, but Myung-gil turned out to be deceiving him, even betraying him. Miss Choi felt sorry that he forbade Hwang to kill Myung-gil at that time, and said that he was afraid of losing Hwang. However, Hwang insists to Miss Choi that he is willing to risk his life to protect Miss Choi because Miss Choi has always cared for him and has considered him like his family. Shortly afterward, Hwang gets information that Hyun-ju and the others were attacked by Myung-gil's men and lost all the treasures in the safe. Upon hearing that, Mr. Choi inquires about Hyun-ju and the others' condition, and Hwang confirms that they only suffered minor injuries. Miss Choi then assigns Lee to find out Myung-gil's partner hospitals, because regular hospitals will definitely report to the police if they receive patients injured by illegal activities. The following day, Mr. Choi tells Gun-woo that he's going to give Gun-woo a bonus because he did a good job. In addition, Miss Choi advises Gun-woo to take his mother to Jeju Island and set up a new cafe there, and Miss Choi will also invest fully to support them. Gun-woo seems happy to hear that, and then thanks Miss Choi as he confirms that he'll help Miss Choi capture Myung-gil because he wants to repay Mr. Choi for being so kind to him. Soon after that, Gun-woo and the others are invited to have lunch at Hwang's sushi restaurant, where Hwang then lays out his plan to get rid of Jun-min and Jang-do at once with Lee's help. However, before executing the plan, Hwang trains Gun-woo and Woo-jin to fight with sashimi knives and understand the minds of professional knife assassins, while Lee trains Hyun-ju to fight while riding a motorbike. Later that night, Hwang conducts a reconnaissance at Myung-gil Associate Hospital with Gun-woo and Woo-jin, while Lee and Hyun-ju keep an eye on the apartment building where Jun-min lives. When Jun-min arrived at the car park, Lee drove straight at him and managed to slash his throat. However, just as Lee was about to leave the car park, he was suddenly intercepted by a car that ran straight into him. They then beat Lee, but fortunately, Hyun-ju arrived in time to save him. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Hwang and the others managed to catch Jang-do, then rush him to Lee's place for interrogation. Upon arrival, Hwang then tells Gun-woo and Woo-jin to make salt water that he will use to give Jang-do a little torture, so that Jang-do reveals everything about Myung-gil. On the other hand, Myung-gil and his men immediately came to the hospital and checked the CCTV footage to find the people who had arrested Jang-do. In addition, Myung-gil also tells one of his men, Jung, to find the person who injured Jun-min. Seeing Hyun-ju, who then goes outside because she can't stand the torture, Gun-woo takes the initiative to follow her to calm her down. At the same time, Mr. Choi arrives at the scene and confirms to Hyun-ju that their fight against Myung-gil will only end if one of them dies. However, to anticipate the worst, Miss Choi intends to teach Hyun-ju and the others something so that they can defeat Myung-gil in case he dies first. Upon hearing that, Hyun-ju gets annoyed at Mr. Choi because Miss Choi is pessimistic that they'll lose to Myung-gil and runs away. Because Hyun-ju refused to listen to his explanation, Mr. Choi then gave an explanation to Gun-woo and told him to always protect Hyun-ju. Miss Choi then interrogates Jang-do, persuading him to tell all of Myung-gil's plans to them, while promising that he will release Jang-do and send him abroad without Myung-gil's knowledge. Jang-do, who knew from the start that Myung-gil was a cunning person and was working for Myung-gil to make a lot of money, chose to betray Myung-gil and revealed everything to Mr. Choi, including Myung-gil's plan to take over Lo Group's hotel and build a casino in the hotel. Jang-do also adds that Myung-gil always keeps important data on a hard drive that is stored in the German-made smart safe in his bedroom. Furthermore, Jang-do explains that the safe can only be opened by Myung-gil's right-hand pulse, and if a problem occurs, Myung-gil can immediately burn all the data through a remote control connected to his mobile phone, which will automatically press the button to open the fuel valve inside the safe. After Jang-do told him everything, Miss Choi then told him to treat his injuries at one of his partner hospitals, while Lee took Jang-do's mobile phone. Meanwhile, Myung-gil tells Min Biem to call his cousin, Gang Yong, who is a high-ranking officer in the police. While torturing Min Biam and letting Gang Yong hear them over the phone, Mangil then orders Gang Yong to find the person who attacked Junmin by informing him about the license plate number of the motorbike driven by Lee. Mangil gives Gang Yong 5 hours to find Lee through the CCTV cameras scattered throughout the city, while threatening to leak Min Biam's nude video footage to the public if he fails to find Lee. On the way home, Lee explains to Gunwoo and Woojin about Myeong-gil's reasons for setting up the casino at the hotel. Lee explains that Myeong-gil will reap bigger profits if his casino business runs smoothly because gamblers will get addicted to gambling and start borrowing money from Myeong-gil if their money runs out. Upon arriving home, Mr. Choi laid out his plan to ally with Myeong-gil's enemies. Therefore, he desperately needed the hard drive and told them to think of a way to get the hard drive. While Miss Choi and the others celebrate their success over drinks, Myeong-gil appears to be preparing himself and his men for an attack. On the other hand, Lee tells Hwang that his wife is pregnant and soon he will become a father. Upon learning that, Hwang then told Lee to back off, but Lee insisted on continuing with their plan to get rid of Myeong-gil. Miss Choi then tells Gunwoo about his past when he first met Hyunju, who had just lost her father. Miss Choi used to give interest-free loans to many people, including Hyunju's father, who was struggling to pay for his daughter's medical expenses. However, Hyunju's father chose to end his life because Myeong-gil secretly charged him and others millions of won in loan renewal fees. Myeong-gil didn't even hesitate to use violence when collecting the debt, so most of them decided to end their lives, including Hyunju's father. Upon hearing that, Gunwoo told Miss Choi that Myeong-gil also cheated his mother in the same way, so he was determined to stop Myeong-gil so that no more people would suffer like them. On the other hand, Myeong-gil and his men managed to get information about Lee when they searched the place used by Hwang and Lee to torture Jang-do. The following day, Jung and his gang of thugs then came to Lee's apartment and prepared to attack. However, Lee quickly realizes their presence and tells his pregnant wife to call the police. Lee seemed overwhelmed by the thugs who ganged up on him, but he tried his best to defeat them to protect his family. Even so, Lee was finally unable to fight the gang of thugs anymore because he was badly injured. Shortly afterward, Myeong-gil arrived at the scene and instigated Lee to betray Mr. Choi, while telling Lee that he would not kill Lee's wife if Lee leaked all the information about Mr. Choi and Hwang. The scene then switches and shows Miss Choi having breakfast with Gunwoo and the others. After breakfast, Hyunju and Gunwoo take So-yeon to the orphanage, while Hwang decides to go to his restaurant immediately. Upon arriving at the restaurant, Hwang is surprised by the presence of Myeong-gil, who then reveals to him that he got information about Hwang from Lee. Myeong-gil also told Hwang that he had killed Lee and his wife. Hwang and Myeong-gil then engaged in a fierce fight, and Myeong-gil managed to kill Hwang. At the same time, Jung and his gang of thugs prepared to attack Miss Choi's house. Woojin, who realizes that they successfully infiltrated the house, rushes to inform Miss Choi and tries to bring him to the basement. But unfortunately, the gang of thugs have managed to break down the door and break the window, so Woojin tries to fight them off, while Miss Choi tries to get down to the basement and retrieve his gun in the safe. Woojin soon becomes overwhelmed by the thugs ganging up on him, especially when Jung shows up and beats the crap out of him. At the same time, Miss Choi manages to take down some of the thugs trying to attack him, but Biam then shows up and beats him up. Soon after that, Myeong-gil arrives at the place and kills Miss Choi, then takes all of Miss Choi's money and gold in the safe, while Jung tells his men to prepare to burn down the house. A few hours later, Hyunju and Gunwoo arrive home to find the house on fire. Gunwoo manages to save the badly injured Woojin and get him out of the house, while Hyunju looks devastated to find a dead Mr. Choi. Upon knowing that Mr. Choi is dead and the ceiling above them is about to collapse, Gunwoo forcibly takes Hyunju away. At the hospital, a nurse tells Gunwoo that Woojin has lost a lot of blood and needs to get a blood donor immediately to save his life. Upon hearing that, Gunwoo thoughtlessly donated his blood to Woojin and managed to save his life. But unexpectedly, Hyunju suddenly left the hospital and didn't answer Gunwoo's phone calls, as if Hyunju wanted to avoid them and go somewhere far away. Sometime later, Gunwoo is seen jogging with Woojin, who is fully recovered from his injuries. Shortly afterward, they do a series of exercises to increase their physical strength, although it seems to be opposed by In-mook, who wants them to forget everything and start a new life. Gunwoo tries to explain to In-mook that they are determined to stop Myung-gil and feel confident that they can defeat him if they follow Miss Choi's every instruction. Gunwoo adds that he can't let Myung-gil commit more crimes and make people suffer. Even so, In-mook insists to Gunwoo and Woojin that he can't let them take revenge on Myung-gil because it could put their lives in danger. In-mook then goes to Miss Choi's grave and finds a letter from Hyunju mentioning that Hyunju decided to forget everything and move to Italy. After reading the letter, In-mook finally decides to let Gunwoo and Woojin continue with their plan and gives them the suitcase containing the cash that was Mr. Choi's last legacy. Upon arriving in the city, Gunwoo and Woojin meet In-mook's granddaughter, Damin, who lets them stay in her apartment for a while at In-mook's request. Damin had also rented out a car for them, and then left after handing over the keys. The following day, Gunwoo and Woojin went to Im and tried to persuade him to cooperate with them against Myung-gil and destroy Smile Capital, because Im and the moneylenders in the area had been cheated by Myung-gil and suffered losses of hundreds of millions of won. However, Im refused to help them because he was too scared of Myung-gil and his gang, who were notorious for their ruthlessness and brutality. Woojin tries to convince Im by promising Im that he will get his money back if they manage to catch Myung-gil, but Im says that his life is far more valuable than his money and still refuses to help them. Shortly afterward, they went to Gwangmu and were shocked to find Gwangmu's office in ruins and Gwangmu with an injury to his arm. Gwangmu then explained to them that some thugs came and vandalized his place because he was unable to pay the bonds as per the agreement he had signed in the contract. Upon hearing that, Gunwoo and Woojin soon learned that Gwangmu had also been duped by one of Myung-gil's henchmen. They then reveal that Myung-gil killed Mr. Choi. Gunwoo adds that Myung-gil also killed Wang and Lee and stole all of Miss Choi's money and gold. Gwangmu initially doesn't believe that Miss Choi is dead and is devastated when he realizes that Mr. Choi is indeed dead. Later that night, Gunwoo and Woojin catch Jae-myeon and his accomplices, who inform them that Junmin is still alive and Myung-gil has found a replacement for Jang-do, who was previously tasked with cleaning up all the crimes he committed so as not to get caught by the police. After getting this information, Woojin then takes a photo of Jae-myeon and threatens to send the photo to Junmin if Jae-myeon betrays them. On the other hand, Myung-gil urges Min-byum to immediately revise the contract according to their agreement. Min-byum argues that his father has checked the contract and refuses to revise it. Upon hearing that, Myung-gil became upset and beat Min-byum up, then told Min-byum to revise their contract immediately while threatening to publish Min-byum's nude video and would make Min-byum end his life because his nude video was spread on the internet. Soon after that, Min-byum got a message sent by someone through his Instagram claiming that they would help him catch Myung-gil. Min-byum then showed the message to Gang-yeon, and they decided to call the messenger to come meet them. Soon after, Gunwoo and Woojin come to see Min-byum and Gang-yeon, who then ask them to drink to test their honesty. Woojin says that he can't drink alcohol because Myung-gil has damaged his liver while showing a scar on his abdomen. Min-byum and Gang-yeon don't mind as long as Gunwoo accepts their challenge for a whiskey drinking competition. Surprisingly, Gunwoo turned out to be a great drinker, as he won the competition and didn't get as drunk as Min-byum and Gang-yeon. The following day, Gunwoo and Woojin hold a secret meeting with Min-byum and Gang-yeon, who bring his employees from the police force, a police detective named Han-gu and the head of the Central Police Cyber Division, Tae-yong. They plan to hack Myung-gil's mobile phone to activate the fuel button inside the safe, then burn the hard drive and all the evidence Myung-gil kept to blackmail his victims, including Min-byum's nude video. On the planned day, Han-gu, disguised as a security guard, asks Myung-gil and his assistant to scan the QR code when entering the building, explaining that it is a company regulation. At the same time, Tae-young was preparing to hack into Myung-gil's mobile phone. However, they don't find any data on the phone, and they also don't find the safe app mentioned by Gun-woo and Woo-jin. Shortly afterward, Han-gu realizes that Myung-gil has two phones, so Tae-young activates a signal jammer so that Myung-gil's phone can connect to Lil Group's corporate Wi-Fi. On the other hand, Min Byum told Myung-gil to delete his nude videos on his mobile phone while threatening to call his family who worked at the tax department to have them conduct a massive audit of Myung-gil's company, which could get Myung-gil into financial trouble by having to pay billions of won in taxes. Myung-gil seems to be daunted by Min Byum's threat, as he hands over his mobile phone to Min Byum so that Min Byum can delete the video. But unbeknownst to Myung-gil, Min Byum secretly connected Myung-gil's phone to Wi-Fi so that Tae-young could hack the phone. Tae-young manages to access the safe's app and starts the burning process, but Gang-young tells her to transfer all the data on the phone so it can be used as evidence to put Myung-gil in jail. Later that night, Myung-gil is furious to find out that his safe has been burnt and all the data stored in the safe has been destroyed. Myung-gil then takes Miss Choi's mobile phone and contacts someone at the police, telling him to hack into the phone to get information on Miss Choi's surviving employees. The scene then switches and shows a young man named Jae-min, who was assigned by Myung-gil to hack Miss Choi's phone. Jae-min turns out to be one of the police officers who is also Gang-young's subordinate. When Jae-min is about to check Miss Choi's phone, Gang-young suddenly appears, so he hides the phone. Gang-young then tells Jae-min that he intends to put Myung-gil in jail because he has evidence of the crimes Myung-gil has committed so far. Upon knowing that, Jae-min then informs Myung-gil about it because Jae-min is also Myung-gil's spy in the police. Myung-gil seems to have suspected that Mr. Choi's surviving employees have teamed up with Min Byum to bring him down. However, Myung-gil had prepared everything, and he also still had the data because he also stored the important data on his laptop. The following day, Jung and his goons start searching for In-muk's whereabouts in a small town after they get information from Jae-min. On the other hand, Gun-woo and Woo-jin manage to get information about Byum from Jae-myung, who decides to work with them to destroy Smile Capital. While checking Byum's personal data, surprisingly, Gun-woo gets a phone call from Byum showing him that they've managed to locate In-muk and kidnap him. Byum then called Gun-woo and told them to come to a shopping center. Byum also threatens to kill In-muk outright if they report to the police. Damin, who learns that her grandfather has been kidnapped by a gang of thugs, decides to help them. Damin confirms that she is an archer as she shows them her archery skills. After seeing Damin's skills, Gun-woo and Woo-jin finally allow Damin to help them rescue In-muk. In addition, they also ask for help from Gwang-moo, who immediately agrees to help them because he wants to repay the late Miss Choi. Gun-woo and Woo-jin then enter through the front door and are immediately surrounded by a gang of thugs carrying clubs. Byum and Jung immediately order the thugs to attack them, and at the same time, Damin shoots an arrow from upstairs and manages to knock down several thugs. Upon seeing that, Jung then rushes upstairs, while Damin tries to shoot Byum, who tries to hide from the attack. Since Damin's attacks failed to hit Jung several times, Gwang-moo went downstairs to confront Jung, while Gun-woo ended up fighting one-on-one with Byum. Gun-woo, who has become stronger, manages to knock Byum out with one punch. While Gun-woo is engaged in a fierce battle against Byum, Gwang-moo seems overwhelmed by Jung as his arm hasn't fully recovered. But fortunately, Woo-jin arrives in time to help Gwang-moo, and he then challenges Jung to a fight with him. Jung initially intends to use a knife, but Woo-jin insults him, so Jung chooses to fight with his bare hands. On the other hand, Gun-woo seems overwhelmed as Byum corners him, but Gun-woo refuses to give up until he finally manages to knock Byum out and render him unconscious. At the same time, Woo-jin also managed to defeat Jung and let Gwang-moo interrogate him to get information about In-muk's whereabouts. Gun-woo then asks Gwang-moo to interrogate Byum to get information about the location of the treasure hidden by Man Gil, because the treasure is Miss Choi's property that was seized by Man Gil. On the way to the location where In Muk is being held, Goon Woo calls Gang Yong, who tells Jae Min to send the police to the location to help Goon Woo and Woo Jin. However, Jae Min then informs Man Gil, and he also accidentally finds out that Han Gu and Tae Yong are working together with Gang Yong. Soon after that, they finally arrive at the location, but they find no one there. Goon Woo assumed that the thugs who managed to escape had reported to Man Gil, so Man Gil immediately rushed to order his men to move In Muk. Gang Yong then tells Goon Woo and the others to go home and assures them that the police will conduct a massive search to find In Muk. On the other hand, Wang Mu interrogates Byum to get information about Mr. Choi's treasure hidden by Man Gil, but Byum tries to end his life instead of betraying Man Gil. Gwang Mu originally intended to let Byum die, but Goon Woo insisted on helping him, so they saved him, then called an ambulance. The following day, Min Byum gets a message from Man Gil, who sends his nude video to threaten Min Byum. At the same time, Man Gil had assigned his men to kill Gang Yong and his subordinates. Fortunately, Gang Yong managed to survive after spewing a poisonous drink, while Han Gu was able to defeat the man who attacked him even though he was seriously injured from the attack. Meanwhile, Tae Yong, who was hit by a truck while crossing the road, was still in a coma and her condition was critical. Shortly afterward, Man Gil contacts Goon Woo and tells them to come to the fish farm if they want to save In Muk, while telling them that he has gotten rid of Gang Yong and his subordinates. Later that night, Goon Woo tells Damin to sneak through the back door and find a good position to shoot, while he and Woo Jin will enter through the front door. However, Goon Woo deliberately drops Damin off further away from the location because he didn't want to endanger Damin's life in the first place. Upon arrival, Junmin orders a gang of thugs to kill Goon Woo and Woo Jin, but they easily defeat the thugs, so Man Gil becomes upset and threatens to slit In Muk's throat. At the same time, Damin arrives at the scene and manages to injure Man Gil's arm. Upon seeing that, Junmin takes Man Gil away from the place because Goon Woo and the others manage to defeat all of their men. Goon Woo tries to chase Man Gil and Junmin, but they manage to escape in a car. Soon after that, the police arrived at the location to conduct an ambush and managed to get evidence of Man Gil and his henchmen's crimes. The police also start arresting Man Gil's men one by one, including his lover and Jae Min, and manage to get more evidence of the crime after searching Man Gil's house. Gang Yong tells Goon Woo and Woo Jin that Man Gil kept all the mobile phones of the people he killed, which is irrefutable evidence of the crime. Gang Yong adds that Man Gil is now a top-level fugitive, but Min Byum is still worried and anxious because Man Gil could have escaped overseas on a cargo ship. Upon learning that, Goon Woo then asks Gang Yong to find information on Jang Du's whereabouts, because Jang Du might know Man Gil's destination if he escapes, especially since Jang Du also confessed to them that he once told Man Gil how to escape overseas without being detected by the police. After obtaining the bank account number Jang Du has been using recently, Goon Woo and Woo Jin lure Jang Du by sending him their phone numbers and 10 million won. A few days later, Jang Du finally calls them and is willing to provide information about Man Gil's escape plan abroad if they pay him 1 billion won. Not having that much money, Goon Woo and Woo Jin then try to convince Min Byum to help them. After some consideration, Min Byum finally agrees to help them. The following days, Jang Du calls Goon Woo and reveals all the information about Man Gil's plan to escape to Vietnam on a cargo ship. Jang Du also informs them about the cargo ship and its departure schedule in detail and suggests that they board the ship if they want to catch Man Gil. Jang Du even helps them to board the ship easily as long as they are willing to pay his henchmen a considerable amount of cash. Later that night, Goon Woo and Woo Jin say goodbye to In Muk and Damin as they have their final battle against Man Gil. Upon arriving at the ship, Goon Woo and Woo Jin split up to search for Man Gil's whereabouts, and Goon Woo manages to find Man Gil smoking on the bridge of the ship. Man Gil immediately runs away when he sees Goon Woo, and at the same time, Wu Jin manages to electrocute Junmin and make him unconscious. But unexpectedly, a fully recovered BM suddenly appears and immediately attacks Wu Jin. On the other hand, Gun-woo manages to catch up with Myung-gil and gets into a fierce fight against him. Myung-gil, who realizes that Gun-woo is physically stronger than him, uses sneaky methods to attack Gun-woo, while Wu Jin seems overwhelmed by BM. Even so, they mustered all their strength and refused to give up as they wanted to avenge the death of Mr. Choi and the others, and also save the many people who had suffered from the crimes of Myung-gil and his henchmen. After a fierce battle, they finally managed to defeat Myung-gil and BM, and also find the truck that holds the cash and gold bars stolen by Man-gil. The following day, Min BM picks them up on his private yacht and asks about their next plan. Gun-woo tells Min BM that Miss Choi has always wanted to help poor people get treatment and hopes that the gold will be used as Miss Choi intended. Upon hearing that, Min BM explains that there are 168 gold bars in front of them, and each bar is worth 500 million won. Min BM then gives Gun-woo and Wu Jin 2 gold bars, each, and tells them that he'll make up the shortfall and use the gold to build a hospital for the poor in Miss Choi's name. The series ends with Gun-woo and Wu Jin coming to the orphanage to pick up So-yeon and start a better life. The moral that we can learn from this series is to remain a good person even when we are in the worst condition, because in the end, good will always win against evil.